Well, hello, and thank you for joining me for another iTWire and Alex on Tech video. I have with me today Matt Jones, the CEO and founder of OVO Mobile. Welcome to the program.
Thanks very much, Alex.
So let's start at the beginning, and can you please just give us the history of OVO and how it came to be?
Well, 5 years ago, I was working in the major telcos, and I was watching the change in consumer behaviour, people getting more content on their phones, the release of the first Apple iPhone, and the efforts the bigger telcos were going to try and build content businesses. And I thought to myself that the biggest opportunity would be to build a content-first telco. And that really means thinking about a future where the fan or the subscriber isn't really paying for the phone service and the access to the network, but really paying for a subscription or a membership to a whole bunch of content that interests them.
In a way, then your phone access is just part of the deal.
That's right, yeah. So and we see that with calls and SMS. They're now just a commodity. They're unlimited.
Okay. In the late 90s, I was paying hundreds of dollars a month for access to telcos, and that was before data, And now, for just a very low amounts a month, you get, as you say, all the voice and text that you could possibly want.
Yeah,
it's
that's
incredible.
Right. The last horizon's data. And the big issue, I think, with data is that it's not a commodity that a consumer really understands. Like, we think of what we do understand is time. I've watched an hour of this, or I've watched a show or a series, but data consumption, it's sort of an irrelevant factor, so it has to go away eventually.
You see it on the side of hard disks where they say, 20,000 MP3s, or, I mean, they sort of try and say how many hours of YouTube, but it's sort of, it doesn't really gel as something that people can really tangibly identify with.
That's right, yeah. So, I mean, and so the insight was that I think the future is we use our phones more like a TV than a phone, and that's true. We're not calling people as much anymore, we use messaging apps.
And in fact, the big threshold was just reached last month.
In
terms of
in terms of the views, So mobile consumption of TV, movies, and sports content outpaced or outstripped TV consumption of the same.
That's on mobile. More people are watching it on TV. It's
more
incredible.
Convenient. Yeah. Who would have thought? But here we are with really fast mobile networks. Data allowances now are getting so big that they are overcoming the irrelevance of data, and eventually, as we know, with TPG coming later this year, we're going to see unlimited plans. What will consumers expect of their mobile phone service provider? Well, to do a lot more than deliver them access to the network. And so we set this business up with a view to acquire content that we felt had significant fan bases in Australia that were underserved because the content's not available on TV. Significant
content that wasn't significantly being offered by other providers.
Yeah, and the big constraint, so then you look at the media industry, and the big constraint for media industry is the number of TV channels they have.
Too many nowadays.
Well, yeah, but even with too many, not enough to be able to put every bit of content on them, right? Because
of the
spectrum. Precisely, because they're driven, ultimately their business model is about advertising revenue. They need audiences to come, so they need content that's big enough or has enough interested followers that they'll come, and the advertiser therefore will pay a fee for that spot inside that program. And what the beautiful thing about mobile and over-the-top streaming is we have unlimited channels. I can set up hundreds and hundreds of channels. There's a lot that goes into acquiring these content rights, and so we started working with the Australian Sports Commission and the AIS to identify key grassroots sports that could be brought from relatively no broadcast to a mobile broadcast platform, and we established all the technology and all the services so that all they had to do was effectively point some cameras and shoot at the event, and then we would take care of everything after that.
I mean, the events were already happening, but nobody was actually filming that. And that was the issue. The content wasn't being captured. It's like when I go to events and for some reason I'm not allowed to film, and it's like all that content's just gone into thin air.
That's right. Well, and you've described it in the past. It was like the music industry, when it digitised, there was suddenly this explosive growth in country music.
Well, the example was that the records stores were always asked to write down on a sheet of paper what was selling.
That's right.
And of course, it was Elvis, it was Madonna, it was whoever it was. But then when they digitised it and every sale was done via a barcode, suddenly the truth emerged that all these other genres that were said, they're not very popular. They were popular. And it's obviously the same with many of the sports that you offer on the OVO Play platform, which are gymnastics and drag racing and things that are not the things that the cricket and not that we want to talk too much about that these days, but the NRLs and the AFLs and all that sort of stuff, which is which is what commands the billions of dollars.
Right, and it commands the billions of dollars because on paper it has the biggest audience, but it's very hard to judge whether or not gymnastics has a big audience if you don't broadcast it and discover the participation base that's interested.
Yeah, it's not just at the Olympics once every 4 years
That's
that
right.
people love this particular sport.
Yeah, Rowie Webster, the captain of the women's water polo team, once said, you can't be what you can't see. So we are creating this platform for fans and participants in these sports to stay engaged with the sport beyond primary school and high school, because they're watching the up-and-coming talent, they're watching their heroes, and it's not, as you say, every 4 years.
Yeah, and when you say you can't be what you can't see, then that comes down to the whole thing that perception is reality, and if you can't perceive it because no one's screening it, well then how real is it? It's like if a man is wrong and no woman is there to hear it, is he really, whatever that thing is, or one hand clapping.
Something about the woods,
yeah, whatever it is. It's that sort of thing, if no one's there to sort of
That's right.
to enjoy it. And that's, so look, you've got a number of telco plans which are very competitive in the market. I mean, some people offer slightly more data, some people offer slightly less, some people have some measure of international calls, whatever it is. Your key thing is you have competitive plans that will stand up pretty much to anybody else is out there, which is an important thing. I see you've evolved over the past 2 or 3 years with that, as you've had to. But it's the content. So just tell us, for those who don't know, how your content is delivered. And I mean, is the content only for people who are subscribers of OVO? What's the platform? How does that work in a nutshell?
Great question. So all of our content is brought onto our platform so that it's easy and accessible on any device.
So
computers, smart TVs, laptops, iPhones, Androids, doesn't matter.
And that's the OVOplay.com.
That's the OVOplay.com.au website.
So anybody can go there.
100% free to air.
Yeah.
And that's really important because, we wouldn't be doing justice to what I just said if we locked it all down behind some sort of subscription
or only
over customers, right? So we consider, in fact, that audience that is watching our content are our customers. They may not have bought our SIM card yet, but they are our customers. They are served advertising around the content, which is how we pay back all the investment. And they're really important. They're the fans. They're the funnel, if you like, in traditional marketing terms, that may eventually decide to buy a SIM card or may not. And the compelling mechanism for them to buy a SIM card will be price and value, but more importantly, can I watch this data free anywhere as an OVO
on
customer?
my mobile phone?
That's right.
Anywhere in Australia.
Yeah, so you think about it like kids who are gymnastics participants. There's 200,000 registered participants, 600,000 audience estimated. Those kids might be on a $10 plan with 1 gig of data. It's not, they can't stream YouTube all day out and about on the bus to school. Well, with OVO, they can certainly stream unlimited gymnastics data free on their 1 gig $10 plan. And
not have to worry about it and have the unused portion of their 1 gig that they didn't use on watching YouTube or texting, whatever it is, free to do whatever else it is they
That's
want
right,
to.
Yeah, use the 1 gig for those other interests that we don't yet cover. So.
And it's content that's very family friendly.
That's right. I think we've tried to make sure that that the appeals to certain niches, but of course doesn't isolate or alienate anyone. And drag racing is quite an opposite to a gymnast, and that's the beauty as well of this platform, is we don't have to create a dedicated channel for an audience. We can create a channel for the sport.
Yes.
So I can self-select whether I want to be a drag racing fan and watch drag racing, and I may not have any interest in gymnastics, or vice versa.
So I mean, OVOplay.com.au is a bit like an iView or a Netflix, but it's of the content that you are offering, which is the gymnastics and various sports. And you also have an announcement that you made yesterday, which could interest some of the any form of gamer, hardcore or otherwise, in Australia. Tell us about that. And also around the world, you have viewers from around the world, right?
Yeah, drag racing, for example, last year did a 1.5 million unique audience, and about 35% of that came from the US. Second country was Brazil, then some Southeast Asian countries. So we're not wherever we can, we make it.
It's not geo-locked.
No geo-locked.
Yeah, which is
some rights
really
we
cool.
have to. But in most cases, we try to keep it global.
Yeah.
And that's how we see the future of media.
Yeah. And do you serve different ads to people in Brazil because you know they're from Brazil?
It's all programmatic, so those ads are even personalised to the demographics of that viewer. So we don't curate the ads; they come in through the ad feed. So you get an ad that hopefully is really relevant to you.
And it would be in Portuguese for Brazilians.
Precisely.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So you mentioned our eSports announcement.
Yes.
So beginning of this week, we announced a 5-year broadcast deal with the Australian University eSports League, the AEL University League.
And it's a cup, right?
Yeah, so it's a very exciting opportunity. Basically, eSports, for folks who might not be familiar, is people playing computer games but competitively, and the prize pool for this university league is $15,000.
And I know it's huge in places like Korea and
massive around the world. I mean, currently $1 billion industry, tipped to go to 20 plus. In Australia, 1.5 million people have every month watched some form of eSports broadcast.
I mean, people have very into that. Twitch and Facebook's copying
exactly.
it,
Twitch is
copying
huge.
it. So this is allowing people to watch these matches happening, and this is predicted to be a huge thing for Australians.
I think so. I mean, at the moment, 1.5 million people watching. Over the next 3 years, that's predicted to grow to 6 million. Now, to put that into context, today's audience or fan base is reported for cricket is reported at 6 million. So over the next 3 years, there'll be as many fans of eSports as there will be of cricket, which is kind of astounding because we've had, hundreds of years of thinking about cricket as one of our foundational sports. And here we are with a sport that's going to emerge to be almost the same size within a factor of 3 years. So,
and often these esports games are strategy games or fighting games, but I mean, in theory, it could be a cricket game.
It could be. Could be soccer. It could be. It could be any sport. Most of the games that we're starting with are those role playing and first person strategy and shooters,
shooting, which are very popular.
Very appealing to university students, and I should say the other thing about the university league is it is consistent with our strategy to make sure we're engaging in the communities, and marketers are increasingly talking about not just demographic targeting, but how do you be relevant to community? Well, my view is you can't just say I'm targeting university students for my SIM card. You got to say, what am I doing for the university student that appeals to them? Why would they, why would they prefer our brand? And so pulling together this league in partnership with the AEL, we've got 28 universities signed up, nearly 50 plus teams. That goes out to about 600 participants and an audience of probably 1.5 million by the end of the first year. So we're super excited about the future of sport. And I know a lot of us are getting our heads around eSports, but you just look at the audience and you know that the next generation are very digital and very mobile centric. And I guess that's the other reason why AEL wanted to really work with us as opposed to perhaps just a mainstream broadcaster. And that's because,
or instead of just sticking their stuff on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. It's about working with a mobile provider who really understands mobile content delivery. It's quite a different production strategy to broadcast TV.
And speaking of youth and the next generation, one of the things that you've been doing, which was quite a sort of forward-thinking move, was to have plans that specifically appeal to parents to give to their children. And you came up with the idea of ensuring that your plans had access to a thing called Family Zone. So just give us a quick wrap on that idea, why it has appeal, why it's been successful, especially in an era where people are saying, oh, kids shouldn't be getting phones and things too early.
Yeah, it's still a very topical subject, and particularly with cyberbullying and safety online. People think a mobile phone doesn't have the same level of risk as a laptop. Actually, is even worse.
Well, I mean, they always say don't make sure there's a computer in the lounge room, living room, where they're always parents. But how do you stop a kid from being under the blankets at 2 a.m. in the morning, chatting to an unsavoury person, pretending to be their friend from school when it could be anybody?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
So how have you?
So what we've done is, in fact, the inspiration was the gymnastics. So I was at an event. There were 30,000 kids under the age of 15. They're all, but when they're not on stage, they're on their mobiles. And I was thinking, who services this segment? Who looks after kids when they get their first phone?
And how do their parents, with so many things, responsibilities, and other kids, how do they manage all that?
Yeah, well, exactly. So, and kids nowadays, the average age kids are getting a phone is 10, so the last year of high school.
Yeah, and they're smarter than their parents. They know how to get around.
Yeah, they know their technology very well. That's right.
Yeah, so it's 10. It's
so 10, the last year of high school. The reason
last year of primary, first
primary.
Year
Sorry, yeah, and the reason it's that timeline is because they're starting to maybe walk to school, have a little bit more independence. Lots of after-school activities. So we said, okay, well, if we want to address this market, what responsibilities do we have? Because it's a very sensitive subject. And, basically selling SIM cards to kids doesn't sound like an attractive way to build your brand.
Yeah, which is why when I introduced it, I said, well, really, it's the parents who are buying it then for their children in a responsible
Absolutely,
way.
Yeah. And
so
all our advertising, of course, is to the parent.
Yeah.
But we felt, most importantly, we had a duty of care to equip the parent to provide that device in a really safe and secure way. So we partnered with Family Zone, which are Australian founded and listed company that does cyber security for kids. and we packaged up a free access to Family Zone with all of our kids' plans sold. So just about 35,000 kids have joined OVO in the last 12 months, all installing the Family Zone cybersecurity app, and the parents can rest assured they can monitor what the kids use, they can block apps, they can turn the phone off at night time, they can have the child request access to the device, so otherwise it's locked, so you know it's not going to be used under the covers at midnight, and they can make sure that the things they don't want them doing on it are protected, and then it can be used for homework and fun and games and staying in touch with their friends.
Or taking photos of things and sharing them on, age-appropriate sites. Is this Android only thing? Does it work on iOS?
Both iOS and Android.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
So great. Very universal.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the short list of all the different sports that you are doing, if you can remember them all?
Yeah, so gymnastics and water polo are our two, what you might call Olympic participatory
Couple of
sports.
flagship sort of things that people really love.
Yeah, that's right. And we're working with a whole range of other government-sponsored sports organisations to come onto the platform.
So you're bringing more content on.
Yeah, so it's always adding to it as the sports are ready and as we're ready to help them with their broadcast strategy.
And then there's
and then in the
racing,
motorsport category, that's right. There's drag racing. We do a little bit of live streaming from inside the GT series racing. And then we've got highlights packages from some of the biggest global sports properties like Formula Drift, and shortly we'll announce, which I'm happy to share with you, but shortly we'll announce Rallycross on the platform as well. So that's that motorsports category. And then the eSports is a whole new part of the strategy, which is really interesting, moving into the digital content space. And of course, because one of our major shareholders is Southern Cross Oz Stereo, you can also stream all the Triple M and all the Hit FM stations data free on OVO as well. So that's all fully integrated.
Which is a great content offering, and one that's only going to continue growing.
Yeah, that's right.
And no doubt if there are people from various sports watching that would like to talk to you, they can get in contact, and then you can see how, if the right fit is there, but you can add to that content offering even further.
Yeah.
And all of that is funded by the operations of providing quality mobile services to people.
That's right. And I think that over time shifts. That's right. So that over time shifts as the audience gets bigger. That audience, some of whom might have a SIM card, some of whom don't, the advertising and increasingly will add really high value pay-per-view and subscription services to people who might want to subscribe to, for argument's sake, the boxing or things like that. We're used to saying, okay, yeah, I'm really interested in that and I want to watch one of those main title fights, as an example. But fundamentally we want to keep all of our content free to air and available to anyone. And then hopefully, and sort of proving quite true with all of our kind of the number of customers who are with us because of the interest in their sports, but hopefully people decide, well, it's running on the Optus 4G network, it's as good as Optus provides, because as you know, Optus don't limit the performance of their network for partners like OVO. It has the coverage, it has the speed, and it has this added benefit of being able to stream these sports that I'm passionate about data free. So
if we fast forward 10 years into the future and look in the crystal ball, without giving any secrets away to competitors, the OVO of 2018 will be filled with content, will be well funded by both subscribers and advertisers, will be a major content property, will have lots of 5G, we'll probably be talking about 6G by then.
We probably will, especially 10 years for sure.
So what else can you think of that will...
Well, we recently made an announcement about a really important acquisition of a company called Incoming Media. And you know what, I've been told to describe it like this. Think of it as a butler on your phone. And so what the butler does is it knows everything about you. It knows your content interests, it knows where you travel, it knows your work, your home.
When you use your phone, when
you're not using your phone.
When you have the headphones plugged in.
It doesn't annoy you when you're sleeping. Yeah. It just sits there and it learns all these things about you. And then what it does is it reaches into our content library and says, I think Matt's really interested in eSports, for example, in PUBG. And it grabs a whole bunch of that content and puts it onto the phone. You don't have to think about it or do anything, so it's all personalised. And then more importantly, it works out that the best time to let Matt know when this content's available to watch is when he's travelling to work in that 1 hour commute on the northern beaches on the way to work, and surfaces it to me then, rather than popping it up at midnight when I'm fast asleep or when I'm at work and I'm busy. It really learns my behaviours. Now, the really important question It comes from that is how do I make sure all my information and all my data my privacy is maintained.
Is this being uploaded to the cloud? Is somebody data mining it like Facebook's been doing or Google's been doing?
Yeah, now this is what's really important about this acquisition and the patents that this company that we acquired has. All of your personal data stays on the device, and it's called what's called edge AI or machine learning on device. So nothing about me, no email addresses or personal details and phone numbers, nothing leaves the device. The device has its own AI running in memory. It's using that AI to know what content to get and when to give it to you, but nothing personal ever leaves the device. So little personal butler knows everything about you, but completely respects your privacy and doesn't tell anybody. So coming back to your question, about 10 years from now, I'm of a firm belief that we want AI to take over all the mundane tasks. One of the mundane tasks in media is going and finding stuff I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So
500 channels and nothing to watch.
Exactly.
Why can't the system give me something?
Why can't it just be my channel with my stuff?
Yeah, it's one channel with everything I want to watch.
Yeah, and I shouldn't have to tell you. You should just learn what I'm interested in by my behaviour. So
without being creepy.
Yeah. Well, that's right. And and you know, as the famous Steve Jobs once said, you know, in regards to privacy, ask them, and ask them again.
Yes.
So I think that's really important. You know, we're not here to kind of get into the creepy, spooky space.
Well, I mean, Eric Schmidt, the CEO, the former chairman or current chairman of Google, said, you know, our job is to get right up to the creepy line, but not cross it. Yeah. Well, that sounds creepy in itself.
It does. Yeah, I'm a bit weirded out by that, but I think ultimately it's just as long as I feel like there's a mutual exchange of value, like you're doing something for me and I haven't, and you've absolutely respected my privacy and you promise never to take it off into the cloud and sell it to someone else, then that's okay. So in the future, a lot of our content will be curated, discovered, and uploaded and delivered to you data-free on your device at the most appropriate time. What that means for OVO in 10 years is a completely new media distribution platform. And because we'll commoditize that telco proposition and you'll be joining OVO to access all this content or watching on the OVO platform, we'll have audiences of 5 or 10 or 15 million people. You know, and I don't limit it to the Australian geography because right now we're not limited to the Australian geography. Advertisers and brands will be able to talk to the right consumer about their products because as much as I know about you and your interest, for argument's sake, in eSports, a brand can reach that eSports fan through that insight because that might be some of the content that's relevant to the eSports fan. You know, if I'm an eSports fan, I might be interested in Corsair memory or other gaming products, and so the ads that are selected to inform you of new products won't be crazy things that don't relate to the things you're interested in.
And you know, we've seen people like Boost Mobile. I think this, you know, it's not the same organisation in the States and in Australia, but that's a major youth brand. We see things like Virgin Mobile across the world. When will we see OVO itself as a telco and media company spread its wings to other countries?
Look, right now there's nothing physically stopping us expanding geographically.
The focus is obviously
the focus is in Australia and to prove out this new form of broadcast. Some of the rights we have provide us opportunity to go into some adjacent markets. Asia is particularly interesting, and that's sort of something
Asian century, the growth. You know,
that's right, 100%. Yeah, exactly. The other thing I think though is when we built this IP and this technology, we built it in what's called a multi-tenant way. And so while we service the OVO Mobile brand here with all of that media and technology capability, our strategy is also to provide that capability for other brands because we genuinely believe in the story of bringing media and telco together as a single industry proposition or a new form of media telco. And so I think there's a whole range of operators across the world, but in particular in Southeast Asia, who could leverage this platform to drive their media telco convergence strategy and service their fans in a whole new way. So you might see OVO's corporate part of its business offshore, even perhaps earlier on, before you see the OVO brand launch in other markets, but time will tell.
And what's the story behind OVO, the name? I mean, I sort of immediately, you know, cheekily think of Omo, you know, the washing liquid, and how you're probably giving the telco market in Australia a good wash up. But what's the story behind it?
Well, anybody who's a fan of Seinfeld knows about one of the first episodes Seinfeld ever did was named the show about nothing.
And the ad campaigns on Channel 4.
That's right, yeah. And it was basically them saying that they think they should build a show called Seinfeld, and what will it be about? It'll be about nothing. There's some parallels to that, to OVO, but the reason I mentioned that is because OVO as a brand was set up to be an iconic, visual and easy to pronounce brand, and be really different both in the way it's presented and the colour scheme and all those sorts of things. And very early on in the business, we worked with quite a famous UK-based marketing branding agency, and we said we just want something that fans and people will learn and become comfortable with saying and remembering.
And in any language, right?
In any language. And so it looks like it should be a three-letter of an acronym, right? It does our version of, or what was you have
one value opportunity.
One value opportunity.
Or one video opportunity, yeah. But I mean, also it's 2 syllables, and all the famous brands are 2 syllables.
Precisely.
Google, Facebook, Apple. I mean, Microsoft is 3,
yeah.
But yeah, there's always an exception, right?
No, precisely. So it is about iconic brand, and it is about building that brand to a point where, and it's really important that it doesn't have the word mobile in it, right? Because
it's not a
pure play mobile business. It is a media and telco business. So the story is it's about whatever the consumer feels that brand represents to them. The one thing we have done is we've added a hashtag right from the very beginning that represents what we stand for, which is hashtag for the fans.
Yeah.
And so even my customer service guys know every sport we're streaming. They ask our customers, are you interested in sport? Because some people join us for interest in sport, and some just because of great plans and products. And so they get to know and learn the customer's interests. It's fundamentally part of our DNA to be thinking about our customers as fans, not just as subscribers.
Now, I've got 2 questions to finish, but I just thought of a third. Often you hear of companies, some companies boast of having an Australian-only support centre. Others, are they're quite happy to have the overseas support centres, but then of course you have the difficulty sometimes of, even if in those countries they've got great English, it can still be difficult to understand, and it's just not the same as having a local support. So what's the short version of your support operation?
Well, there's 2 parts to great service and support. The first is you have to build your systems to be faultless, or to a point where 99.99% of the time they're faultless.
So that the system isn't causing the problem.
Yeah, you don't want to create self-harm and disappoint your customers, and it's something you could have avoided by better systems and processes.
Which will probably cut out half of the potential calls.
Probably
right off the bat.
Probably more than 90%, frankly. A lot of telco service failure is in systems, and it's a huge effort to you can over-engineer it. When we set this business up from the very beginning, we built a platform that was at that 99% tolerance. And so we built it like you'd think of electricity. Like we can't have outages, we can't have buttons that don't work, we can't have apps that fail, we can't have anything that fails. So we take out all of that. The second part of it is, and it's to a degree something very specific to the Australian market, which is one of the things I find very frustrating with any brand or service in the Australian market is if I have to wait too long. I'm reasonable with my expectations, but if I have to wait half an hour, that's terrible. And then when I arrive there, if the person is not able to understand me and help me and is well educated and skilled.
And then when I put you onto another half an hour wait, then of course you're hearing the thing, it's important to us. It's like, how important is it if I've had to wait half an hour?
And everything builds to there's simplicity in our products, simplicity in the offer. The reason we don't have 20 different subscription packages is because, just as Netflix proved, just one thing, everyone understands it.
So what's the sort of average call times for you then?
Yeah, so the average wait time I think today is about 48 seconds. We've got a team all built here in Australia in our office. They sit next to me. In fact, I sit next to the head of customer service because it's the best place to find out what might be going wrong. We handpick everybody because we really want people to be part of our brand and to be part of that story. And they run on a platform that efficiently manages every single channel. So whether it's phone calls or live chat or social media, everything comes into that platform and they handle it in real time.
And so my second and last question is always to simply ask if you could please share the best advice that you've ever received to help you get where you are today.
I think there's 2 bits of advice, if you don't mind me giving you 2 answers.
I'd love to hear it.
I think the first is humility. So I'm somebody who always is learning. So everyone I meet has something I can learn or will share something I can learn from. So be humble, and that makes you wide open for growth and learning. The other advice is, I guess, to always have ethics in what you do. So sometimes that might mean a longer path to success because.
But you haven't had to cut corners that are going to come to bite you in the bum.
Yeah, and you can end up in media, particularly as you know in your trade, if you've misrepresented things or if you're chasing the headline and not the quality and the substance. Building this brand, it's super important to have the ethics in what we do. So
let's just look at something that's topical for, as we're recording this, of course, the cricket with the cheating scandal, and then the Manly Football Club having dudded, it's gone over its salary cap for 5 years. I mean, it's always the cover.
It always comes around.
It always comes to get you.
So we do everything we can to make sure that everyone understands transparency, absolute honesty. If we aren't doing well in some part of the business, whether it's service or performance or whatever the case may be, we're really honest with ourselves and we talk about it openly. So they're the two bits of, I guess they're advice or life things to live by.
Absolutely.
But,
Well, I always like to ask because we get different answers, and it's always interesting to find out, and it's always good for the people watching to absorb that and hopefully implement it in their own lives. We could live in a paradise on this planet if we wanted to, and sadly we don't, but we can all at least do our part and try and make it a better world. So finally, what's your final message for iTWire viewers and readers, and for your current and future customers and partners?
Well, I think at the end of the day, in this industry that I work in telco and media, it's time that telco and media think of the individual. So I think for anybody on the other end of this conversation or watching this video, I believe firmly that the brands, including OVO, have to look at what we do for you, and for you to be satisfied, we do more than any of the others to enjoy your membership to us. And so I think the key message is thank you to everybody who's joined OVO and supported OVO. And for those of you who haven't, we'd love you to try us because we think we do a really good job of looking after our customers.
Matt Jones, CEO and founder of OVO, thank you very much for your time, and I hope to talk to you again in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.